Welcome to Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. This is Jay. In this episode, we interview Mohammed Khatib and Thomas Hofland from the Samidoun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network. This is our third interview with members of Samidoun since October 7th, 2023, and we will link to the others in the show description. Mohammed Khatib is a Palestinian refugee from the el-Helweh camp in Lebanon. He lives in Belgium and is the European coordinator for Samidoun. Thomas Hofland is the coordinator of Samidoun, Netherlands. Samidoun Political Prisoner Solidarity Network organizes solidarity with Palestinian political prisoners and their struggle for freedom and liberation. Their network was founded in 2011 and since then expanded to more than a dozen countries. For the context of this discussion, as Samidoun write, quote, on October 15th, the United States and Canada sanctioned Samidoun in an attempt to repress political organizing in support of the Palestinian people's struggle against genocide, colonialism, and occupation, and more than 10,000 Palestinian political prisoners that are being tortured and killed by the Zionist entity. In the U.S., the Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control announced the sanctions. Well, the Canadian government has listed Samidoun as a, quote, terrorist entity, unquote, under its criminal code. We will provide a full release to Samidoun's response to these sanctions. November 14th, after we had recorded this interview, Charlotte Cates, the international coordinator for Samidoun, who we've previously interviewed on 2 occasions, had her house raided by Vancouver police in British Columbia. While there is no official statement yet on this matter by Samidoun, we just want to say we denounce this escalating repression on the Palestinian movement on Turtle Island and send our solidarity to Charlotte and her family and to Samidoun and all the people who have been organizing on behalf of the Palestinian people who are facing repression by these imperialist, genocide-supporting states. Nothing reveals the nature of the imperialist countries we live in the so-called global north, like the fact that as states like the US, Canada, and Western European countries provide billions of dollars in arms to the genocidal Zionist garrison that calls itself Israel, that these states also have to suppress civil society organizations like Samidoun, who advocate for the very political prisoners held in that same genocide-enacting garrison state. In this interview, we get into how Samidoun understands these repressive actions and how we collectively can and must fight back amid the attempts by Western governments to complete their genocidal siege and ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people in Gaza. As the interview mentions, Samidoun is a part of Masar Badil, the Palestinian Alternative Revolutionary Path movement. Masar, founded in 2021, aims to organize and support the Palestinian diaspora as a crucial force of the national liberation struggle. As the interview mentions, while these restrictions may prevent, in some places, us from being able to materially support Samidoun as an organization, what we can do is continue to organize. As Mohammed said, quote, to support the steadfastness of Palestinian people in Gaza by all means, end quote, and practice your right to resist. So we're having this conversation on November 5th, 2024. I'm really grateful for both of you for taking the time to have this discussion today. The work that your organization does is extremely important, and we're going to be talking about that work and also talking about, the movement right now kind of on an international level as we are now over a year into this genocidal response to Al-Aqsa flood that the United States and Israel, of course, the Zionist entity, and Western countries and Western backers have been engaged in this genocidal onslaught on Palestinians. And people have been organizing for a year now. And one of the things that happened recently is that Samidoun, which you both are members of, has been designated as a terrorist organization by the country of Canada. Previously, I know that the Zionist entity and also Germany had given such a designation to Samidoun, and the U.S., where I'm having this conversation, their Office of Foreign Assets Control, the same day as the Canada thing, it was like a dual designation, described Samidoun as, quote, a sham charity that serves as an international fundraiser for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, end quote. So just talk a little bit up front about this recent development and, how these designations, what impact that they have on Samidoun and on the broader Palestinian movement as we're experiencing this, brutal genocidal war on Palestinians?
Yes, no, thank you so much for having us on, Jared. It's really a pleasure also to be here, even though, of course, we are talking indeed in time of 1 year since the genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people. And I think it's very justified of you to say that the genocide is coming as a response, first and foremost, to Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. And I also think we should see these designations of Samidoun, but of many other Palestinian organizations that have been banned in many different countries throughout the last year, but also throughout the past decades, organizations of the Palestinian resistance that have also been placed, of course, on the terrorist list. And I think the first and foremost thing that these designations is an extension of the imperialist and genocidal campaign that's being waged against the Palestinian people and against oppressed nations everywhere in the world. And in that sense, it's, trying to oppress, first and foremost, the Palestinian people and the Palestinian diaspora, and continuing on that, also their supporters that come from many different backgrounds and many different countries in the world. I think specifically also what we are seeing in the repression and these designations, it's that it's trying to, because, also we have to remember that these countries, they play themselves an important role in the genocide. They are funding Israel with weapons, with money, with unlimited political support. And this is another way for them to aid the Zionist occupation of Palestine. And if we talk about the maybe concrete effects of these kind of designations, it's of course that it becomes more difficult for organizations to organize publicly. And it tries to kind of separate these organizations or movements from the massive support that is, in the United States, in Canada, but also in Europe and in many other countries. And in that sense, I think also it's an important aspect kind of to see it as a colonial tool to try to influence even the Palestinian movement or the solidarity movement in that sense, by saying that, even though there are legal ways you can support Palestine, there are also illegal ways in which you can support Palestine. And we will punish the people who are doing those illegal ways because we don't agree with them. And the only way you can be active for Palestine, if you are active with the United States, US aid projects in Palestine, if you are serving the European Union subsidies that are given to certain organizations. So this is, I think, also one of the ways that we should see these designations. But I think at the same time, it's very important to realize, I think, that over the last year, we have seen so much repression also of the solidarity movement internationally, especially, for example, of the student intifada, where thousands of students across the world have been beaten, arrested, while standing up for Palestine. And to also see that, of course, on the one hand, this repression is difficult for the movement, but at the same time, it pushes the movement to develop, and even it creates more supporters for the movement because more people see that what's happening in Palestine affects their country as well. And even it's a real struggle that is taking place in their country that affects everyone. It's a matter not even only of liberating Palestine, which, yes, is very much at the heart of this struggle, but at the same time, it's about the United States as a settler colonial state, which is oppressing and exploiting indigenous people, black people, the working class. So it's about free speech. It's about freedom of organization. It's about freedom to exercise your political and democratic rights. So in that sense, I think there's both difficulties that come with it, but it, in a way, also is a logical consequence of this struggle and a way to gather support and to, I think, deepen and in a way radicalize the movement.
Thank you, Thomas, for this introduction. And it's very, very important also to hear. I think also I could add, this is kind of a way to intimidate the Palestinian community and the solidarity movement with Palestine. Actually, to terrorize the solidarity movement. to label a Palestinian civil organization. Samidoun never claimed to be an armed resistance organization. We know all of this terrorism rhetoric always related to an armed movement and political organizations or national liberations movement who carry armed struggle, not necessarily who support those organizations. So I think today we are facing a new stage. And I think this is related to the new era that the 7th of October is giving. We are in a new stage where the imperialist and colonial states are saying, if you are a mass movement, if you are a civil society organization, solidarity organization working for Palestine, we will label you as a terrorist organization. But if you operate in Europe and in the US, I think also this labeling means nothing. I mean, as Samidoun, in a very humble way, I could say this is a badge of honor to be labeled by the so-called United States of America and the so-called Canada and so on as a terrorist organization. But we are not labeled by Malaysia as a terrorist organization. We are not labeled by Nicaragua as a terrorist. We have a great relationship with Venezuela, by Spain yet, or Denmark or Norway. So the US, Canada, Germany is not the center of the world, and just because they have this kind of labeling and so-called, I mean, Samidoun has been involved in the struggle against the terrorist list since we started as an organization. This is one of the most of our priority as we struggle for the liberation of the prisoners, for the right of return against the terrorist list, and not only for the Palestinian organizations, for the Communist Party of the Philippines, many other organizations who are part of and if you look at it, this is basically all the organizations who are fighting colonialism and occupation and so on. So, I mean, it's very logical to have this kind of confrontation, but also it's a sign that the confrontation in a higher level, and this is basically to attack not only the solidarity movement, but as well because the identity of Samidoun is important here. Samidoun is not a solidarity organization with Palestine. And we are not only a Palestinian organization. Samidoun is a Palestinian Arab internationalist organization. We have Arab members in Samidoun. We have African members in Samidoun. We have Jewish members in Samidoun. We have US American citizens in Samidoun. We have Palestinian refugees in Samidoun. We have Palestinian political prisoners who are members inside Samidoun, because Samidoun used to have a chapter in Palestine before it was recognized by the Zionist state as a terrorist organization. So Samidoun is a complex, and that's why it's very difficult to dismantle Samidoun as a network. You can label Samidoun, you can make it more difficult for the Palestinian community, for the solidarity movement to join Samidoun, to be part of Samidoun, to build connections of Samidoun. For sure, this will affect us, will make our struggle a little bit difficult, but compared to also what our people are facing and what the level not only of repression, but the level of oppression and genocide and ethnic cleansing and so on, also sometimes we feel even shy to speak about this as a great repression that we are facing. I mean, as an organization and politically, we need to talk about it in the bigger sense that this is not to attack few people who are building an organization. And this is not because we support just the armed resistance because we are stubborn or we want to be cool people. This is a principal position. This is because we are Palestinian. This is because those freedom fighters are our family members, our cousins, brothers, sisters. So our connection to the Palestinian resistance goes much deeper than how the Zionists or the settlers in the United States will understand this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you both so much for those important reflections as we start off. So, obviously, in this discussion, we do want to talk a little bit about the repression, but I do think it's really important, kind of as you just alluded to, Mohammed, and you mentioned too as well, Thomas, is like, you know, we're 13 months, you know, almost to the day as we have this discussion into this genocidal, you know, response. And as we're here, you know, obviously there's so much going on, you know, the efforts to ethnically cleanse the North, you know, have been really intense in the last few weeks, you know, and obviously there's historic sites that have been targeted in Lebanon now, that and entire villages that are being, you know, wiped off the map, that, you know, very much resembles what we've seen in Gaza for the last year. And as all of this going on, and of course there are people resisting also in the area, in Gaza, in Lebanon, of course, you know, as we've talked with you all about in previous discussions, but thinking more from, you know, the imperial core, thinking from the United States, Canada. I don't know how things are in Europe. And these are mainly just my own feelings at these times. What I'm hearing them reflected by some others as well is that it feels like there's also been some slippage in the last few weeks or few months, perhaps as people, turn efforts towards, the presidential elections in the United States, which I think is a totally ridiculous site to waste your energy, specifically as both of these candidates are vocally supportive of genocide in terms of the main two-party candidates, and obviously supportive of U.S. empire and imperialism more broadly. But I just wanted to see from your perspective, what do you think of the importance of this time in terms of continuing to protest, to make your voices heard, to resist in other ways, to take direct action if you are capable of doing that and, feel like you can do that? I mean, one, I don't know if you agree that the trend that I'm describing is legitimate. Maybe it's not what you're seeing where you're at, but nonetheless, I think we're in an important moment to continue to keep the momentum going, forward. And so I just wondered if you had thoughts on that, kind of the current context we're in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think about it from the US only perspective as you described. I totally understand that it's also a critical moment in the US, not because of this tension between the fake election, but I think it's a critical moment socially, where there is social polarization between classes and different social groups and so on. And that's why Palestine is very much present. That's why we see this great movement in the United States, in Canada for Palestine. That's how we see the unity of the Palestinian community, the Arab community, the Black community, the indigenous community. We see this braveness of the students' movement that started in the US and spread widely in the Western world and even in the Arab world and so on. But I want to see it from the perspective of the 7th of October, not only as an armed operation was conducted by the Palestinian resistance, but I see the 7th of October as a new era where the Palestinian resistance forces kind of relaunched the Palestinian revolution. The Palestinian revolution that took place in 1967, this revolution started by an armed operation and has a name, and there is a statement called the First Statement. That's where the entire national liberation movement for Palestine was born. This is where we saw the born of the PFLP, the DFLP, Fatah, and so on. Even Hamas and Islamic Jihad, they come from this era. I think the 7th of October, that this brave act that was conducted by the brave people of Gaza who live under genocide since 1948, not since the 7th of October, live under occupation and apartheid and ethnic cleansing since the existence of the Zionist movement and its pro-colonial project in Palestine. I see if 1948 until October 7 was the moment of occupation and genocide and ethnic cleansing, I see the 7th of October and above, it's an era of liberation for the Palestinian people. This is the first time my generation saw and witnessed today not only the Lebanese resistance is fighting back and struggling in Lebanon, but we see the refugee camps today are an essential power in the confrontation. All the Palestinian national forces are contributing with martyrs from the refugee camps of Lebanon and Syria, even though the Syrian front is not open, but the Palestinians from Syria are essential part of the Palestinian resistance in Lebanon as well. We saw how the Palestinians and the Jordanian community are acting, even though with all the repressions that they are facing from this corrupted monarchy controlled by the West to protect the state of Israel. But we see today the Palestinian and Jordanian masses are playing a dangerous role against the US and the Zionist entity and Arab kingdom regimes and so on. And what we witnessed after the 1948, after this mini catastrophe and Nakba compared to what's happening in Gaza now and in the 7th of October, the numbers of the refugees today are higher, the numbers of the martyrs, and all of this, I think this will generate also a new Palestinian political movement, a new Palestinian political generations, new masses will be involved in the struggle in a totally different way. We see today the Palestinian people and the Palestinian community have more capabilities. This generation who are displaced today in Gaza, all of them, they have master degrees, they speak different languages, they are educated people, they are communicating very well with the worldwide community, with the Palestinian diaspora. We see artists, we see filmmakers, we see, that's why when we speak also about the resistance, and when Samidoun say we support the Palestinian resistance, and on top of it, the armed resistance, but also we mean every baker in Gaza, and every nurse, and every doctor, and every cleaner, and so on. Everyone who's struggling today in Palestine to keep alive. This society, this community, this strength, this steadfastness exists. It's hero and part of the Palestinian resistance. That's why we cannot separate the Palestinian students movement today and before and its contribution. That's why after the 7th of October, we see all of those forces with the Palestinian diaspora who exist today in the belly of the beast. We never had this amount of Palestinians in Germany. That's why Germany is shaking today. And that's why the Zionists and the far right and the fascists and the Nazis in Germany are finding a new enemy. Yes, because there is Arabs and there is Muslims and there is tens of thousands of those Palestinians and Syrians and Kurdish and Turkish. And guess what? They are Germans. And they have German passports. We don't know what they have in their houses. We don't know how they act, how they communicate, what they speak. And this is how they are freaking out. That's why they are using the intelligence to follow young people in the buses to intimidate Palestinians, or group of German police officers busy to look for a woman on a bicycle with a kufiya to beat her and to slap her and to arrest her. This is exactly fascism. Right? This is not only because of Palestine and because there is genocide. This is Germany being Germany, and this is the Nazis being Nazis, and the fascist movement being fascist movement. But we became new citizens in this continent. We are today almost maybe 1 million of Palestinians in Europe. This is a new situation. Thomas can tell more about today the Palestinian community in the Netherlands. They are an important force even in the election in Belgium or elsewhere, right? So how this community today will develop its involvement? We see today those Palestinians somehow from second or third generation, they don't speak even the Arabic language in Latin America and elsewhere. But after the 7th of October, we see their involvement. They are leading the social movement. They are leading the solidarity movement. They are part of their local struggle in every country and every continent, whatever it is. They are part of the progressive movement internationally. And that's why Palestine is becoming dangerous. And that's why the 7th of October and this flip in the region, this is what affected the Yemen and Iraq. And today, not only Israel is in danger in the region. Today, the American bases in Jordan and in Syria, they are in danger. And that's why the Iraqi resistance is not attacking only Tel Aviv, but they are attacking the American military bases in Syria. What they are doing there, this is part of the occupation. This is part of colonizing the entire region. So the 7th of October, this movement, what's happening, the attack on the Palestinian solidarity movement for Palestine, or the anti-war movement, the civil movement, I think it's much greater than only, attack here and there against one of those, against organization or an individuals. It's part of this new era that it was initiated by the Palestinian people and by the Palestinian resistance. This is first time this war is not initiated by the Zionist Americans. We took the initiative. We are taking this responsibility. We are paying the price, but this is for the path of liberation.
I very much agree, of course, with everything that Mohammed said as well. And I think when we, maybe look at also the movement for Palestine in a bit longer term than only, let's say, for sure, maybe it goes in ups and downs in the last year. But I think in general, overall, the last year, also on an international level, it has been by far the biggest uprising for Palestine in history ever. And just to compare, for example, I don't know exactly the history of the United States in that aspect, but in the Netherlands, 50, 60, 70 years ago, it used to be very normal in these kind of times when Israel was at war to have huge solidarity gatherings for Israel and to have tens of thousands of people coming together to literally collect money to send to Israel to fund the war. Nowadays, the Zionists in the Netherlands, they struggle to gather even a couple hundred of people. And if you look at the people who they are gathering, these are the most Christian fundamentalist people. They are, I'm sorry to say it, but weird people when they get interviewed. They really are the most racist, most extreme Zionist people in the country. It's not very mainstream anymore to be Zionist or to be pro-Israel. Nowadays, it's mainstream to be pro-Palestine. And this is exactly like Mohammed was saying, this has been achieved by the Palestinian people and by the Palestinian resistance, I think, by 7th of October. But even if we look back at the Saif al-Quds battle, or even all the previous battles that have happened in Gaza, the response of the Palestinian people and resistance after the Oslo Accords through which the international community and Israel and the Palestinian Authority try to claim that now there can be peace in Palestine and there can be no war anymore. But the clear rejection of this path, especially after more than 30 years of Oslo, has been the biggest anti-colonial movement in recent decades in Europe and in North America, but even in Asia, Africa, and in Latin America, I think, in an international solidarity kind of way. So I think this is also an important aspect to keep in mind, and to also see that, the movement that we are having now is in a way very radical as well. It's doing a lot of direct actions as well. I think the political debate and discussions taking place within the movement and the issues being raised by the movement are a very high political level, so to speak. It's about national liberation again. And, even I was very young when the Iraq war happened and the protest against it. But, I don't think necessarily then also the question was, how can we support the national liberation struggle of the Iraqi people? And nowadays, the discussion, and that is again because of the Palestinian people and their resistance, is very much how can we politically, concretely support the efforts to liberate Palestine from the river to the sea and to really defeat the Israeli occupation. So I think that's, in the long term, it's a lot of positive things as well.
I think this is the real Arab Spring that no one want to see it that way. We say always we cannot liberate Jordan or Morocco or Yemen without the liberation of Palestine. And that's why in the 70s and 80s, all those Arab revolutionaries came from all Arab national liberations movement to fight in Lebanon and in Palestine, and were martyred with the Internationalist movement as well, because Palestine was an important spark to a greater movement. And this is what we see today in the Arab world. We see contradictions that were raised and funded by imperialist forces between sect groups, between religions, between so on, in Iraq, in Lebanon, and so on. We see today the Arab people are united against the Zionist entity and against the American military bases to exist in the entire Arab world. We need to open the question about colonialism today, not only in Palestine. Palestine is a specific example today of Zionist Western colonialism, but Morocco is under colonialism. Saudi Arabia is under colonialism. Emirat is colonized where there is slavery there, and so on. So there is a greater questions of social and economical liberation, that also liberation from Zionism and colonialism, that must open our eyes on the entire Arab world and the region.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Before we go further, I did want to, you both have touched on this a little bit, but I think it would be good to talk about a little bit more in terms of what your own, thinking is in terms of why Samidoun specifically was targeted as an organization with these new repressive measures. And just a couple of quick things for me that have been thinking about. One is, I think Mohammed, as you said earlier, this notion of Samidoun as really integrated right within the Palestinian people and therefore also the Palestinian struggle and Palestinian liberation. But there's also, one, there is the vocal support of the resistance, an uncompromising position that you all have had there, and which I should say I also believe is the correct position. But beyond that, there is also the issue of the prisoners, and the political prisoners. And this is specifically one of the key area, right? The Samidoun was founded as an organization around the struggle of the Palestinian political prisoners. And, I think that struggle kind of inherently involves some of these key issues because many of the Palestinian political prisoners have been resistance fighters, right? Have been liberation fighters, right? And have been from these organizations that the West describes as terrorist organizations, which, as you noted earlier, Mohammed, is part of the reason why we have to, and I think this is a really key area of struggle for folks. It's very difficult to figure out how you successfully do this. But, these lists are really horrible in terms of these terrorist lists and these prescribing organizations and things like this, in terms of the ways that they kind of try to legally restrict how we can support liberatory struggles in the world, right? So anyways, I just wanted to say that a little bit from my perspective, but I did want to hear more from you about why you think Samidoun was kind of targeted here. And I appreciate the point you made earlier, too, that there's many other organizations that have been targeted in different ways. And we know that is true. But yeah, go ahead.
I mean, first of all, how Samidoun view the political prisoners. As you mentioned, not only some of these prisoners are leaders in the movement. Samidoun, we view that even the Palestinian National Liberation political prisoners existed before the current Palestinian National Liberation movement. This movement existed in the 30s, right? During British colonialism, the songs, the heritage, the culture, the literature, the art of this political prisoners movement comes from the prisons of Akka, where the British were assassinating the Palestinian leaders of the great Palestinian revolution in 1936-37. And this is where also the students' movement in Palestine, where in the 30s, first students' conference took place in the north of Palestine and so on. So we see the students' movement and the political prisoners' movement is the essence, is the base of the Palestinian national liberation movement, as the working class, as the popular classes, and so on. So our approach in the political prisoners movement was from the beginning of Samidoun that for us, those are the leaders of the Palestinian national liberation movement. Those are the main cadres of the first Intifada, the second Intifada, the Palestinian civil society organizations, the Palestinian youth organizations, the community leaders, the leaders in the refugee camps, the leaders of the armed resistance, the engineers of the Intifada, of the co-founders of this brigade and that brigade, and so on. So this is the essence of the resistance of the Palestinian society, even if they are kids, women, elders, or men. We don't differentiate in that. So their liberation, it's an essential liberation for our liberation, not only because those are people who are victims, subjected to oppression, and we need to contribute by using our humanity to liberate them. And that's why also in Samidoun, and I think all the organizations who focus on the political prisoners, we never claim to liberate one political prisoner. Or for example, if one political prisoner is suffering, we never claim that we manage to take out of the suffering. No, we do believe that this is the job. We try, we mobilize, we campaign, we reach out, we inform people about the situation of the political prisoners. We do our duty throughout the political prisoners. The liberation of the political prisoners always will come with the resistance, and this was proved by the history of the Palestinian people and the history of the Palestinian people's resistance. And that's why the 7th of October, one of the main objectives of it was to exchange the political prisoners. So then also where Samidoun comes, it's a very natural role, since Samidoun is one of the organizations who focus on the political prisoners. And this, we do believe that the resistance, even we all remember, I mean, the Palestinian people, sometimes you hear criticism from the people about the resistance, that they are not doing enough throughout the liberation of political prisoners. We need more steps. This was the discussion within the Palestinian masses and people. So also what happened on the 7th of October is what the resistance response to the people's demand to liberate the political prisoners and to liberate Palestine as part of it. So the 7th of October was not isolated from the Palestinian people. Samidoun was not isolated from the 7th of October. And then our position and unconditional support to the Palestinian resistance, this is also comes from ethical and principled position. So we see all of these factors that Samidoun was playing a role also to connect the political prisoners movement in Palestine with the political prisoners movement, the Palestinian one who exists in the diaspora, like George Brahim Abdullah. So we open cases in France and in the US, like the Holy Land 5, for example. This was kind of forgotten. So then this kind of connection also with the national liberations movement, like the political prisoners in the Philippines or the black movement in the US or in Europe, there is political prisoners in Greece and Italy and so on. So then this role, I think, was dangerous for the Zionist and the imperialist forces. And then also Samidoun, as a Palestinian Arab internationalist organization, is involved in a new Palestinian political umbrella, let's say, not a political organization, a political movement that called the Alternative Palestinian Path, where we also noticed that, okay, Samidoun is an organization who focus for the liberation of the political prisoners, but since we are refugees, and we see that the liberation of the political prisoners and the right of return, they are connected, right? So then what's our role then? But we are also against Oslo, and we see also we are very much involved against the Palestinian Authority and the internal Palestinian struggle. We have a clear position on the PLO and the PA and the role of the PA with the security coordination, because this is what is resulting for the Palestinian freedom fighters to become political prisoners. So we cannot only support the Palestinian political prisoners without speaking out against the Palestinian Authority and its liquidation project to the Palestinian cause, and struggling and fighting internally against Oslo and so on. So we were part of that movement, but we do believe also we are not the only one, and it's not Samidoun who will liberate Palestine, and we need this coordination and connections with hundreds of thousands of initiatives that also now after the 7th of October have been blooming all around the world, right? From art perspective to cultural perspective, music, direct action. Samidoun is a very small, tiny bit of this great movement. This is how we see our role. We never claim that we represent any movement. But then we want to be part of a movement that join on a basic political principle: the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea, the liberation of all Palestinian political prisoners, right of return, democratic Palestine where everyone can live in equality and justice, the role of the Palestinian diaspora to be an essential part of the national liberation political Palestinian program, and not only to be part of the solidarity movement. We see Palestine as part of an international resistance movement against colonialism, against racism, with the indigenous community, with the Black people community, and so on. So then we were part of building and co-founding this movement that's called the Alternative Path, Masar Badil in Arabic, with Al-Karama, Al-Judur, with the different Palestinian political organization. We are focusing on the diaspora. We are building connections with the Palestinian resistance, with the Arab resistance, and this is our right. And if we will compromise about our right to support the Palestinian resistance and to be part as Palestinians in the Palestinian resistance and in the Palestinian political movement, then we will definitely compromise about our right of return, because how we will achieve our right of return if we are not involved in the resistance movement and if we are not involved in the national liberation program as part of this Palestinian people struggle? So we will definitely be attacked.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thomas, did you want to add anything to that?
Maybe very briefly, just because I think that was, Mohammed mentioned a lot of, I think, the reasons why they target Samidoun, but also the movement broader. And I think maybe, very specifically, like, to why they target Samidoun, very much like Mohammed is saying, like, we never claim to be kind of any leadership of any movement or a symbol of a movement. But I think somehow that is kind of what these states and their designations are doing. And that's not to attack only Samidoun, but it is exactly to attack the whole movement. That is the goal of these attacks on Samidoun and this designation. It's not to attack only us. It's to create a precedent of them limiting political, even democratic organizations, no? Like, if we look at the actual basis of these designations and the arguments they are using, it's only lies and it's nonsense, no? We are not funding any Palestinian resistance group. We are an independent organization. And this is also one of the things that scares them, I think, that we are so politically and organizationally independent, that they have no idea how we are managing to organize chapters in 20 countries without us having thousands of dollars or euros in our bank account. I'm sorry to say, we are not a rich organization by any means. We do not operate as an NGO which has employees and offices and which organizes their conferences in 5-star hotels. We are, in that sense, people's movement of normal people, of refugees, of workers, of students, of all the kind of people in society that are, not the top 1%, let's say. And somehow, because of our positions, I think, and because of this new Palestine movement developing in the last couple of years in the West, they are trying to find ways to attack the movement. And they have tried in different countries, different ways also to outlaw Samidoun, and different countries. Like if we look at Germany or France, for example, many organizations that have been banned or are being repressed or in the process of being banned. No. So yeah, I just think it's kind of important to mention that they tried to create this precedent to attack the whole movement through Samidoun. And that's also why we think, of course, it's important to keep fighting back by through legal means, through political means, to build support against this, but not only to defend ourselves, because this is part of the broad attacks that have been happening against Palestine organizing for years and for decades.
Yeah, I appreciate that. How effective have these processes been in different states, do you think, in terms of having a repressive effect on Samidoun, but also on the movement? I'm curious the degree. I think they do this from a position of weakness. I think they do this because they see themselves losing a kind of ideological and moral struggle within their countries around these issues of Palestinian liberation. And so then they target organizations like yours that are, so clear on, I watched an NBC News interview with Charlotte Cates, and they interviewed her for 2 hours and only pulled out a few things that she said. But it was very interesting to watch because you watched it and they're trying their best to make her look like, the rhetoric that she's using is so unhinged and it's so, but everything she's saying is just true. She's just saying, what you all say, which is an accurate analysis of the situation and what's going on. And so it's kind of an interesting thing because it's and I know people do buy that propaganda. I do understand that those kinds of attacks and that mainstream outlet and the way they frame it, that, you see the comments on their YouTube page or whatever. But one of the things about the people who buy that is it tends to be people who have already totally accepted the Zionist narrative, right? So it's you can see that even in their responses to it, that, they don't like Samidoun and they don't like Charlotte and they don't like the analysis, right? Because they've bought in basically the propaganda around what happened on October 7th. They bought the propaganda around the need for their countries to be, supporting the so-called state of Israel and so on. Sorry, I'm getting kind of sidetracked with this question, but I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, what is your assessment so far as an organization of the impacts of these measures? I mean, obviously there are impacts to them. I don't want to diminish that. And you all are fighting against those impacts in the ways that you talked about, Thomas. But I'm curious about whether it has almost the opposite of impact on some ways in terms of the movement, because I think a lot of people recognize the spuriousness of these kinds of attacks on you all. And in some ways, it draws more attention to also your analysis of the situation as people are looking at your organization. So anyways, I don't know if there's anything coherent in there that you want to respond to.
I mean, it's not the first time that Samidoun was attacked. Since we started Samidoun, we are under constant attack. We are always on the Zionist media. The fact that we don't speak about it, we don't campaign about it, we don't use it, and so on, doesn't mean that doesn't exist. Always there's Zionist analysis here and there about Samidoun, about what we are talking about, NGO Monitor, and all of this Zionist bullshit. We were under this in heavy term, and that's why we're assigned as a terrorist organization by Gilad Aradan, who was at the time also the head of the prison system in Palestine. The same minister who resigned Samidoun, designated Samidoun as a terrorist organization. But I will give you an example today, for example, it's happening in Berlin. So the fact that Samidoun is banned in Germany doesn't mean that there is no movement in Germany. Every day there is demonstrations and mobilizations and events, and people are fighting back the police and so on. But in every big demonstration, or anyone who will take any permission today from the police will obligate you to give a statement on behalf of them to the demonstrators before any start of any event for Palestine. And then you have to say that people are not allowed to chant or to carry slogans or flags for those organizations. And then they will name those organizations, that's including Samidoun. Right? I think some of thousands of those people have never heard about Samidoun before. When the German fascist police are beating women and children in front of thousands of people, those thousands of people are going back home radicalized by this fascist act. And then this is pushing them to read and to learn. When Palestinians or people who support Palestine are attacked by their teacher in a school in Germany, making them questions a lot. And it's very interesting today that also the new generations and the very new young generation that I'm countering, and I feel very old in front of them. I am 34 now, but they are very critical and very clever politically and socially and very conscious. And this is not on the benefit of the Zionists today. So I think this kind of attacks, we always benefited from it. And we never, this never broke us. We always are stronger, right? We are never less. We are never weaker. We are never like we found ourselves in a way that what we do, we will keep doing for Palestine. What we do banners and events and protests. We will be in every protest. We will do every banner. We will keep talking about Palestine, and we will be part of this alternative path movement. We will stay part of the Palestinian society, Palestinian solidarity movement. We are part of the working class. We are there. You cannot erase Samidoun. And even all of these so-called banned organizations and on the terrorists, they exist in Europe, they exist in the US, they exist everywhere, and all of the national liberations movement always find its way and new characteristics of works and methods. We can be very creative, and they are racist enough also sometimes to think that Palestinians and their supporters are not capable and are stupid, and because they are racist and they dehumanize us. So also for sure they think we are animals and monkeys. So they don't think that we are capable to do the 7th of October, to liberate Palestine, to go back to Palestine, to build our society, to use all of our privileges and skills and everything that we can. We will put it on this battle. And also, we know that sometimes we are asked, but you don't think, for example, you are making this too much for people to support Palestine. We are not asking anyone to say what we say or to do what we do. We respect everyone's contribution to the liberation of Palestine and the movement. If you give one person from your time, one person from your effort based on your social, economic reality, we respect that. We never shame people. We don't see everyone should go to prison to be revolutionary and to prove that they are fighting for the liberation. Everyone can do what they can based on their capabilities and efforts and skills and everything. And what we are doing in Samidoun, we are doing what we can do and what we feel that we have to, and it's our right and duty to do so. So we cannot compromise about our rights, and we cannot, put our backs to our people. And we are talking about this still, repression, Samidoun, US, the terrorist organization, so on, in a time when we watch our people are being burned alive. We are attacked, and the entire movement is attacked about being an anti-Semitic. But we see today, for example, in the US and in Europe, the Jewish youth are leading them and being part of the students' movement with the Palestinians, shouting out, "Free Palestine from the river to the sea," and for the right of return to the Palestinian people, and so on. But we are still blamed about being anti-Semitic in a time when the Palestinian people host the Jewish refugees who was burned alive. So we learn from the pain also of other communities, not only the Palestinian people who are suffering. And also in the time of the Palestinian genocide, we consider that there is genocide in Sudan, there has been genocide in Congo, genocide and war against the people of Nigeria, against the people of Yemen, against the people of Venezuela, against the people of Nicaragua. We are part as Palestinians of this international. We are part of the oppressed classes in the United States of America.
I appreciate it so much. One of the things that I think is noteworthy, and again, you've already alluded to this a little bit in our discussion, but these countries, right, where Samidoun has faced the most, these designations, right, put on these lists and so on. We're talking about the so-called State of Israel. We could add to it the settler colonial states of the United States and Canada. And you all have not been shy either about drawing those connections, right? And Germany, of course, has its own history of genocide in modern-day Namibia, in addition, of course, to the Holocaust, right? So we're talking about countries here that share very deep histories of imperialism, of settler colonialism, and of genocide, and also of anti-Palestinian racism, going way back. So I'm curious, obviously these must play a role, I think, in these designations. And do you find that your organization, and I think probably not as much as you alluded to earlier on, Mohammed, is under attack in countries that you operate in that don't have these same kinds of histories and don't have the same level of complicity currently in, the genocide that is taking place in Palestine?
Not, of course not. No. It's a list. We should make them a list. We should make the genocidal list. We should have our own list. They are in one list, and they have their historical connection and ongoing. Now there is German ships in the Mediterranean Sea are bombing also Lebanon. So American military bases were in the Gulf countries and so on. This attacks, for example, to create fragmentations and bad relationship between the Arabs and the Iranian people, as our enemy as Arabs and Palestinians should be today the Pharisee people, as the Pharisee people exist since 2 weeks in the region. We are neighbors since thousands of years of this history, but creating all of this siege and segregations and divisions between countries and so on. Everyone is aware about this in a modern time today in our region. The majority of the masses of the Arab world, of Palestine and so on, understand this very well. As Thomas said today, we see this movement in Africa today uprising. We see the African community in Europe today, in France and in Belgium. It's interesting also why this community today exists in France and in the United States, this post-history colonial state that is still playing in colonial forces. Until today, the French is still in Africa, and then the Germans still try to control Namibia until now in different means and so on. That's why, for example, as Samidoun, we are very sensitive when it comes to compare all the time Palestine and South Africa. We do believe that there is a historical connection and organic relationship between the National Liberation Movement of Palestine and the National Liberation Movement of South Africa that still exists until today. And we don't believe in Samidoun that what happens in 90s in South Africa is as the same. We don't believe on what happens in the 90s in Palestine, that we see Oslo and the so-called solution took place in South Africa. It's very similar. We refuse Oslo and we refuse the solution, and we still have a relationship with forces in South Africa who still believe that there's still economic and social liberation must go on, and the distribution of land and so on, because we still see the colonialism in South Africa and the Zionist movement existence in South Africa, how strong it is until today, and still plundering the South African people resources and so on.
And definitely, maybe just to add also to it, like, we are definitely almost only under attack, and I think the Palestine movement in general is only under attack in these colonial countries. So, I mean, if we look at the rest of the world, the whole of the global South, they don't have this relation with the Zionist entity. Even if they have a relation with the Zionist entity, it's not the same kind of relation that they have as the colonial countries, and they are not the main enemy of the Palestinian people, because these countries in the global South that have a relationship with the Zionist entity, often themselves, they are controlled by colonialism still, and under oppression and exploitation from it. And I think also it's important to mention that Samidoun doesn't only have chapters in Europe or North America. We also have, for example, a chapter in Iran. We are not under attack. The Masar Badil or many of its organizations like Al-Karama, they exist in different countries and continents, for example, in Latin America, where we are not under this kind of state repression for supporting Palestine and working for Palestine. And I think, just very briefly to mention, but I think it's clear for everyone that, of course, this battle taking place for Palestine and for its liberation is really also a battle on the world level, no? It's a symbol of the changes happening in the imperialist system where the US is weakening and other countries or regions are getting stronger. And this is very much part of it. And that's also why it's important for these colonial countries, imperialist countries, to attack the Palestinian movement and to try to suppress it, because for them it's part of the danger of losing their dominance in the whole world and losing their hegemony. So yeah, Palestine is very much part and at the center, in a way, of this global change as well, and it will continue to be so.
And at the same time, for us as Samidoun, or also for me as a Palestinian who live in Europe since 14 years, big part of my life, we understand very well that the Zionist movement was not a movement built in Haifa and Yafa and in Jerusalem and in Gaza. The Zionist movement was built in Basel, in Amsterdam, in Brussels, in New York, and so on. In these countries, colonial Western core. Right? We know very well that the Zionist entity in Palestine as a settlements for the West will never exist without the initial support by the EU and by the US. But at the same time, in the main core, in Belgium, I don't believe the majority of the Belgian people today stand with the state of Israel. The majority of the Belgian people today stand on the right side of history with the Palestinian people against the genocide. And we see this in the streets. We see this in the public transportation. We see this in the different scales of events and actions are taking place to show this solidarity. So then also Palestine becoming a local problem for the West, becoming annoying in the streets of New York City and in the street of Amsterdam, that people are chanting for Abu Ubaidah and for the Palestinian resistance and for the Palestinian and Arab, for the Yemeni people and so on. And then Palestine in these countries are uniting all of these Arabs who came here as refugees because of the so-called Arabic Spring and the colonial wars and interventions and so on, and siege and so on. That's why the Syrian people, both of them coming from different political positions, but they are united to support Palestinians in the streets of Europe. The Iraqi people, whatever they have any political position or divisions in Iraq, but they are all united on supporting the Palestinians. The Yemeni people are united today more than ever because of their support to Palestine. So every political movement who are engaged today in this movement for Palestine are feeling and being stronger more than ever by being engaged in this era of liberation after the 7th of October. And this is what we do believe also, as the Palestinian people have duty to fight colonialism and Zionism and to defeat Zionism in Palestine, we also in the West have a duty where this Zionist political movement was established and exists to bury it in our countries and to say, this is from where Zionism was born. This Zionism must end here, and this should also end with it. All of this colonial ideology that must be defeated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. So for other organizations and individuals that are in the movement with you, and there are obviously many, how do you think that they should relate to Samidoun now? Obviously, many in the movement, want to be in solidarity with you all. But there is fear, right, that gets created also by these designations. And in some of these countries, these designations may create, certain legal consequences for material support. I know that Samidoun has often talked about the importance of moral and ideological support for Palestinian resistance groups in the past, that because that we can't give material support, right? And so I'm just curious, as you all are thinking about this, I know it's difficult, to put yourself in other people's shoes and whatnot, but what are your thoughts on sort of how other groups and organizations and individuals should relate to Samidoun given this context?
First of all, we care about the safety of every individual in our community or in any political organization or group. And we respect all of this fear and intimidation, and that's why we are fighting this back, because we are fighting for the liberation of our community and for the well-being of our community, not for our community to be under threat and so on. But our message to our people that this is not because of us, this is because of our enemy. Is taking these steps not against us, against our people and including all of us. So we respect where people need to protect themselves and to be safe, to be able to continue to struggle for Palestine. So this is, I think, the great support that we could receive as Samidoun. Mobilize for the Palestinian political prisoners. Help us to spread the words about the situation of the Palestinian political prisoners. Support loudly the Palestinian resistance in any way you can. And when we mean the Palestinian resistance, the right of the Palestinian people to resist, including armed struggle, because this is part of our rights. But about our right to resist, and then practice your right to resist, and don't give up about your rights also to mobilize and to organize for Palestine, not for Samidoun or not for any other entity. We mobilize and coordinate and organize for the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea, for the liberation of our people, for right of return. So this is our message. Focus on right of return. This is what annoys the Zionists. This is what makes them shake and freak out. Support the Palestinian resistance, support the steadfastness of the Palestinian people in Gaza by all means. Buy them water, food, everything is necessary and important today in Palestine. But the more important for us politically and ideologically, that us first as a Palestinian community to organize ourselves and to rebuild our institutions and mass institutions. I mean by this, in every community, we should build a woman feminist group, LGBT group for the liberation of Palestine. Workers should be organized for the. If you are in a union influence in every political and social space, we should be active for the liberation of Palestine, but based on bigger political principles that connect with every other community who's facing oppression and repression today with us as Palestinians. Be on the street with other causes, bring Palestine to other questions, to other topics of struggle that other people are fighting for, and teach us also, connect with us as Palestinians on the same principles, reach out, build more connections with different groups, educate our people and our community about our rights and our rights to organize and to mobilize, our right of return, but our right of remain, our right of migrations, our right of our documents, how we confront the police, how we communicate with the police in the neighborhood and in community who are trying to intimidate us, to tell us, remove the flag from your window. This is what we are facing today in Europe, for example, right? So this is different. We are locals today. So how we act as locals? By this, we need to get educated and to learn how to take our rights, because this is the only way how we can develop our society. If you are not engaged in one of the organizations, if you cannot join Samidoun, join other organizations, join any organization, any local SGP group, any union, any collective that's fighting for liberation, organizing the community. This will be great support for Samidoun. Connect with the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon and with the peoples of Lebanon today who are fighting. We cannot go to Gaza, but we can go to Lebanon. The airport is open to Lebanon. Anyone who wants to join the Palestinian resistance, they can go to Lebanon. Anyone who wants to support the steadfastness of the Palestinian and Lebanese people, either by being a nurse or by being a doctor or by being a progressive photographer or whatever, go to Lebanon and support the people. Gaza under blocked by siege by the Egyptians and the Zionists and the Americans and so on. Lebanon, no, it's open. If you cannot go to Lebanon, go to Syria and organize delegations to meet the reality of our people and build relationship with the Palestinian resistance, because this is the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, and those are the ones who are sacrificing their lives to protect us as Palestinians, to protect the cause of Palestine from this liquidation and normalization program, and to liberate Palestine. So we should contribute to this resistance. I mean, the resistance in the 70s and 80s could never happen without the Palestinian community and the international community in the US, without the internationalist and progressive and leftist radical forces in Europe, without the support of the Latino leftist movement. There was martyrs from those continents, from those local leftist white so-called groups. There is German martyrs for Palestine, if we speak about Germany as being a fascist state. Many different political organizations. So I think we need to rebuild these connections internationally.
Just to continue a little bit on what Mohammed was saying, that we have to continue fighting for Palestine. I think it's very important to also recognize that these kind of repression have the goal of making you busy with that repression and kind of moving away from the actual struggle. And exactly like Mohammed is saying, that is what we are not advocating for. And for sure, we appreciate and in a way, of course, need support and are very much building that and receiving a lot of it, I think. But at the same time, the main focus still, as it has always been and always will be, on liberating Palestine, enacting the right of return and upholding the right of resistance for the Palestinian people. And I think that's an important message that we want to convey as well.
Yeah, right on. So we've talked a little bit about the designation lists, the, so-called prescription lists, or to create proscribed organizations. That's what it's called in some states. And then in other states, it's called, terrorism lists and things like this. So, this is a very important area of struggle, really. I mean, it's a difficult one because the state, this is something that is, on some level, you could say it's totally arbitrary, but it's not totally arbitrary because it's also very targeted, right? It's intentional in terms of what organizations that they go after, and they have a purpose for that, right? And, this is unfortunately in our world right now, this is a state's sort of prerogative, right? To sort of say this is a terrorist organization, and it creates this stigma. It creates a certain stigma around organizations and around movements where then not everybody, right, but certain people just sort of lose their ability to reason once you throw this word into the mix, and they, refuse to sort of question it. And I think it's such an important thing for people to question, not to say that there's no such thing in the world as terrorism, right? Or that there's no such thing as an organization that, does things that we want to object to as people, right? But that's not really the purpose that it's used for the most part. The purpose that it's used for is to, to demonize and to criminalize, liberation movements and resistance movements of different kinds. So I'm curious how you all think about, obviously you're going to fight it on your own terms as an organization in terms of these designations, but I'm curious about the need. It feels to me like there's a real need to make this a more important, demand and call and site of struggle for people around these designations. Because as you all mentioned, part of the problem and part of the reason that Samidoun becomes targeted is because all of the Palestinian resistance groups are targeted with these types of designations, and so if anyone wants to uphold the legitimacy or the right of those organizations to engage in a liberation struggle, then suddenly they're being said, even if they're not materially supporting, people will say, oh, well, you're supporting a terrorist organization, right? This is what people will say if we say, I believe that Hamas was right to do what it did on October 7th, or I believe that the Palestinian resistance groups in Gaza have a right to blow up the tanks that are coming into their city, and things like this, right? And so I'm just, kind of curious on your all thoughts around, struggling over these designations.
Samidoun is a collective act. The meaning of Samidoun, the literal meaning of Samidoun is as a community, as a collective, as a group, to be steadfastness. It's something that the Palestinian people are doing. You cannot prevent today a 19, 20, 27 years old man or girl in Gaza to blow up a tank. And you cannot stop today Palestinian students in BZ University from being steadfast under the happy interrogation in the Zionist prisons. And also by this, you cannot stop the steadfastness of the Palestinian people. And then the word Samidoun itself, it exists in every statement of every political organization. In Arabic, it exists in every act of Palestinian or act of resistance. So I think we should focus on the term of Samidoun, right? Of course, there is terrorism. Our analysis of terrorism, that there is a state terrorism, that there is colonial terrorism. And we see that this terrorism should and must be confronted with the revolutionary people's order and violence for the sake of liberation and to be liberated from being under this terrorism and to be terrorized all the time. It's a psychological method. It's not only done by weapons, it's done by every checkpoint, it's done by every imprisonment, it's terrorizing to their family and so on. It's done by every invade the Zionist occupation army will do to every campus in a university or to the student housing and arresting people at the middle of the night in front of their children. And this is the methods of terrorizing. This are confronted by the Palestinian people by resistance violent act, which is legitimate by international law. But then, as you cannot prevent this act, as you cannot prevent any act of resistance, you cannot the act of being steadfast as Samidoun, and then make Samidoun as a banner, make Samidoun as a slogan, put Samidoun as a t-shirt, make events to explain to people what the meaning of Samidoun and why we need to be Samidoun and why our people, we learned from the Palestinian people in Gaza how to be steadfast and why we need to learn this, because what we might face in the future in Germany or in the US if we are facing fascism and if this fascism is developing in this certain way, and really need to be Samidoun and steadfast and to be as a community organized and so on. So we should learn from the peoples of Palestine, from the people of the Philippines, from other peoples who are struggling to still exist. That's why it's dangerous to build the connection between the indigenous people in Canada and the Palestinian National Liberation and so on. So I think we need to explain to people who we are, what we mean, why we exist. We should also engage people in we are banned as Samidoun because Free Palestine from the river to the sea is banned as a slogan in German. So before Samidoun was banned, the slogan that Samidoun carried was banned. So, I mean, you don't need to fight for Samidoun as an organization to exist, but we all should fight for the slogan of Free Palestine from the river to the sea to be in every street and every bank. Write it anywhere. Write it in the school. Write it in the toilet of the club. Write it anywhere you go, because this is the fight today. It's about the concept, and as you explained, they create this kind of understanding, how to understand terrorism, how to understand virus, but then also we should spread how we understand liberation, and then what the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea means. We should open a discussion about this. We always say also, as Samidoun, we need to fully boycott the Zionist state of Israel until we dismantle this colonial entity, but at the meantime, we should normalize with the Palestinian resistance. We should normalize with the program of liberation to liberate Palestine from the river to the sea, and the right of the Palestinian people to resist. So meanwhile, we are boycotting the Zionist entity. We should be struggling to normalize our right to exist, our right to be as a Samidoun against this so-called terrorist list, and the right of the Palestinian people to be part in any Palestinian political group. This is not up to an American, Canadian member of cabinet or Congress to decide me as a Palestinian and otherwise deport me to Palestine. I'm not happy to be in Europe I am not migrant in Europe. I'm refugee. We respect the struggle of the migrants, and for everyone who want to remain and to fight back against racism and against racist migration policy and so on. But at the same time, me as Palestinians, I come from up the north of Palestine that was occupied in 1948. I accept under the conditions of Oslo, return me to Gaza. Now, I don't mind. So I'm facing deportation from Belgium. I don't mind if the Belgian state comes tonight to my house, take me and send me to the borders with Egypt. I will be with my people, but then send me back home. Or otherwise, you should question this.
Wow. Thomas, you probably don't want to follow that one up, but go ahead.
No, not to really follow it up, but yeah, to take it a bit back to how to fight against these designations as well, the terrorist listings, especially like not necessarily speaking about Samidoun, but about the Palestinian resistance organization as well, which, yeah, like Mohammed also said, it's one of the core campaigns also of Samidoun since its founding, kind of, to get the Palestinian resistance off these lists. But at the same time, we also recognize, of course, that ending these terrorist listings would, in a way, be the same as ending imperialism. Because these terrorist listings, or putting the Palestinian resistance on these terrorist listings, and by that means Communist Party of the Philippines, resistance groups in Latin America and Africa and the whole of Asia, they are created because they are endangering US and Canadian and European interest in the region. So to get rid of these terror listings, it's much the same as, the situation of Palestinian prisoners. Of course, we support, and it's necessary to fight them on a legal basis. But at the same time, we recognize that Palestinian prisoners cannot really be liberated by Israeli colonial Zionist court. And probably US empire will not end its listings of Palestinian resistance groups because they go against each other. They are opposed to each other. They are struggling with each other. And this is exactly what is happening in Palestine. So in that sense, yes, we should campaign against these terror listings, but that is also in a way a means of building a movement in all these countries to fight against this colonial system that they have created over the whole world and also in Palestine. And I think, in that sense, we should continue and build these campaigns to end the terror listings because they are unjust, because every people, even according to international law, have the right to resist colonialism and oppression by any means necessary. But at the same time, I think, we should have definitely a long-term picture of how liberation and oppression end, and that is through large people's movements that end these systems of hegemony and domination.
Yeah, it seems like the only way ultimately. Go ahead, Mohammed. Do you want to say something?
I mean, we should expose also this state terrorism, right? Like in a time when there is this so-called terrorist list. Okay, but then if Samidoun is recognized as a terrorist list, So then what Germany will be on the list if they are sending today phosphor weapons and giving nuclear submarines to the Zionist state of Israel? I mean, it's interesting that this is like, okay, we understand that some of those organizations who are interested in this because they were like doing greater armed attacks against the imperialist force. But today, Samidoun is designated as a terrorist organization because we saved Free Palestine from the river to the sea. So this means literally every Palestinian or everyone who was part of the solidarity movement will be labeled in the future as a terrorist. Because we say Free Palestine from the river to the sea, we should really fight against this back as a community and as a political groups and so on. So this is not about the existence of Samidoun as an organization, but then it's about our right to exist as political entities and communities and people who are struggling for a just cause. Then we are being literally labeled as a terrorist, and by this they meant to terrorize us. We should be in the street, of course, but we should take this seriously and fight back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the questions that I had. I mean, is there anything else that either of you wanted to share with our listeners? This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you both taking the time, to talk to us and to share everything with our audience. I think that they're really going to get a lot out of this discussion. But yeah, is there any other things that you wanted to say in closing?
No, not from my side. Thank you so much for inviting us and for your listeners as well.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thomas, did you have anything?
Yeah, maybe also relating to the last point, but, on a historical perspective, we have always seen that, when anti-colonial battles have been won at the end of the day, all the leaders of national liberation movements have been celebrated as heroes, even by those who deemed their enemies in the past now. And I think if we look at what's happening now in Palestine and the huge sacrifices that are being paid for by the people in Gaza, the people in the whole of Palestine, the people in Lebanon, the people in Yemen, and in the whole region, and by that extent, the people in the whole world, but especially in Gaza. If we see the heroism also of the Palestinian leadership and the resistance who are vilified by our media and by politicians and our political so-called leaders in the West, we see how, for example, Sinwar died not living behind in a very secure place outside of the battlefield, but right in front of where the battle was happening until his last breath, resisting the Israeli occupation forces shooting at him with rockets, literally being modern Che Guevara, so to speak. And I think it's wrong maybe even to compare him to Che Guevara. He's his own person with his own story and representing by that the story of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian resistance. And I think if we see now the huge mass mobilizations of people that are fighting for Palestine, I think we should recognize it as a historic moment and see the 7th of October last year as really, like Mohammed was saying, a new era of liberation. Not only even for the Palestinian people, for them, yes, first and foremost, but by extent of all the people in the region and all the people in the world. Palestine is the modern Vietnam. It's at the forefront of this global struggle against imperialism, against colonialism, capitalism, racism, sexism, even all the social movements, from the climate movement to the LGBT movement to the women's movement, the student movement, all of them coming together to fight for Palestine and getting stronger because they are fighting for Palestine, deepening all these contradictions within Western countries that have been building up over the past decades with the intense racism and upcoming fascism that we see in almost all countries. Palestine and this battle is at the forefront of it. And I think everyone is seeing this and is feeling it. And that is why also there is so much support for Palestine. And that's why people are literally putting their bodies on the line to block arms factories, to block parliaments, to block ministries of foreign affairs, to occupy Israeli embassies. And I think in that sense, it's only a privilege for all of us, maybe also speaking as a non-Palestinian myself, it's a privilege to be part of the movement. And I think we respect everyone's actions and effort in this movement. And I think we should all try to not be intimidated by this repression or by the violence that is inflicted, because we know that the Palestinian people, the Arab people, and all the oppressed people of the world, they will keep fighting. And there's no other option than to keep fighting, because as long as there exists oppression, there will be resistance until it will be victorious, like it has been in the past in many countries, and like it will be for sure in Palestine.
All right. That's a great place to leave it. Thank you both for this discussion. This has been really good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for that.